Number 5, these men are not fixed stars, but wandering stars. Now think very prayerfully about yourself. And we're not concerned about condemning our past, but about confirming our future for the glory of God. What if every person in the room were to enter into explicit agreement with God to be a charted reef, a moisture-laden cloud, a tree heavily laden with fruit, a gentle wave, and a fixed star? Some of you might be thinking already, and may be inclined to do so more as we proceed, well, I really would like to be the man, the woman God has called me to be. The happy thing is, friends, God doesn't call us to be anything but what He makes it makes it possible for us to be exactly what He's called us to. These men failed in all these things, not because of Christ's inadequacy, but because they were truly unbelievers. You see, we have done huge disservice to ourselves and to others by pretending that faith is passive acquiescence. But faith is not passive acquiescence. Faith is active obedience. For those of you who have never made this study, may I commend to you the tremendous urgency of going through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and paying close attention and making notes about every time God connects obedience and faith. And just as an illustration, if you love me, keep my commandments. I have found at least 40 times when our dear Lord Jesus Christ connected faith and obedience. And if you love the book of Hebrews like I do, and you're acquainted with chapter 11 like I am, every person who is named in the book of Hebrews in chapter 11 was told what to do by God, and they did it. And that was accounted to them as faith. So I say again, the wonderful pattern of the revived life set forth in verses 12 and 13 is not something beyond us. Oh, it's beyond us personally. It's beyond our human ability, but it is wonderfully provided for us by the Lord Jesus Christ. So let's take these 5 similitudes of nature. Now remember, I've already said they're not only similitudes of nature, but similitudes of promise. Now what do I mean by that? Well, number 1, verse 12. These men are hidden reefs. Hidden reefs. Let that get a hold of your heart. And ask honestly, am I a hidden reef or a charted reef? You understand, don't you, that many of the finest natural harbors in the world are created by charted reefs. Yes, ocean reefs. Thank you for calling out on that. By the way, anybody else who isn't getting it, let me know. What's the sense of our being here if you miss it? Charted reefs. Think about this. God designed you. He sent Jesus to redeem you from your sin and to make you a part of his everlasting family in order that you might be a charted reef. I like to hope that by the grace of God, anybody in all my world can draw the ship of their life up next to me in the charted reef of my life and know perfectly well they are safe. We all want to be able to say, follow me as I follow Christ. And we don't want anybody to have the bottom of the ship of their life ripped out because they sail across the uncharted reef of my life or yours. And so be quite clear now in yourself. Are you a charted reef? Does your life make a safe harbor for anyone in all your world to draw near and to anchor beside the ship of your life and to know absolutely, oh, at last, safety, certainty, and enjoyment? Now, let me repeat again. I'm not talking about human skill. I'm not talking about innate ability. I'm talking about the power of Jesus Christ to take an uncharted reef that has caused many a soul to be ruined under the power of Christ, being a charted reef. Never out of place. Never taking anyone by surprise because you've had a season of backsliding and you are not now what you once thought you were. No, charted reefs. We need to enter into an explicit agreement with God by the grace and the power of Jesus Christ. I will be, from now on, without any exception, a charted reef. So any sailor in all the world sailing on the seas of life can know where there's a safe harbor created by the grace of God in my life and yours. Number 2. Clouds without water carried along by winds. Did you ever go to church with a desperately hungry spirit and leave feeling even worse than you went? Maybe you had a season of prayer before you went, and you pled with God to meet you in the service that morning. But the sermon just robbed you of what little was there, and you went away crushed and empty. If I may again speak personally, I had a terrible season in my life, having been grievously defrauded by some Christian men, and I plunged into an awful season of uncertainty and doubt. And on the Sunday, I was so deeply thankful that I wasn't preaching anywhere because I knew I had nothing from the Lord to say. But I went to church myself, and as the preacher was proceeding, now I'm not crediting myself with speaking or thinking kindly. I'm just telling you actually what happened. As he was preaching, I was saying to myself, I wonder if this old duffer had a little automobile accident this morning, one of those fender benders that kept him from getting here and speaking these silly words. What would he have missed if he hadn't gotten here and preached this sermon? And in my nasty spirit, I was thinking he wouldn't have missed anything but the paycheck. Now, I'm not justified. I'm telling you, I was in desperate need of a word from the Lord, and what I got was lousy chaff. Did you ever give out chaff in your Sunday school class? In your preaching? In your personal witness? Were you ever a dry cloud? Are we not living in a world where there is an incredible thirst? Oh, it's not known usually to the person what it is they thirst for, so they chafe after entertainment and pleasure, for sex and money, for prestige, for recognition. But deep down, what they're longing for is an authentic word from God. We need to enter into explicit agreement with God that we will never tolerate another day in our life when we're a dry cloud. By God's grace, I'm going to live in such a way that anybody who comes under the cloud of my life will be rained upon with the fresh graces of Jesus Christ. I want to be so saturated with Christ that if you come near me, you're going to get all wet with that which is truly precious. This doesn't come automatically. This doesn't come as a result of an experience in a conference. This comes as a result of an agreement with God from now on. Through the grace and power of Christ, my life will be a heavy, laden cloud, dripping fresh graces from the mercies of God upon all who come under the cloud of my life. Remember that incident in the Old Testament after that confrontation between the prophet of God and the prophets of Baal? And the servant was sent out to look to see if he could spot a cloud. And he came back and said, no cloud. Sent again, and the same report, and again. And then eventually, I have seen the cloud the size of a man's hand. And the prophet says, run, run, get back home quick. It's going to pour. Why shouldn't our lives be clouds so laden with the fresh moisture of God's grace that people know when they come near us, they're going to get drenched? And number 3, trees. These men of whom Jude writes are barren trees. Jesus spoke strongly about barren trees. John the Baptist had a strong word on a tree that doesn't bear fruit, that will truly be cut down and cast into the fire. But God is inviting each one here. Isn't it wonderful? You don't have to be educated. You don't have to have a long experience as a Christian. The only requirement of being a tree constantly bearing the fruit is an agreement with the Lord. From now on, the power of Christ will work in me so that I am perpetually bearing fruit in season. And number 4, waves. Now, I don't know how you are. Maggie and I, as some of you know, live near Chicago, and we don't get to sit down on the ocean shore very often. And in fact, to be quite truthful, Maggie doesn't really care to go with me all that much to the ocean shore. And I'll explain why. There are times when we're so tired, we hardly remember our own name. For a number of years, we had a dear friend who owned a big hotel on the ocean front at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Now, he contacted me a number of times and asked, when are you coming? And never really. What I thought was that he was sort of like a salesman filling up his hotel rooms. But he kept at it, and he kept at it. And he called at a time when I was so weary I could hardly lift my feet. And I said, no, what do you mean exactly by this invitation? Oh, he said, I mean, I have a hotel room free for you. So I said, all right. And I had some other meetings in inland South Carolina. I said, Maggie can come down and meet me. And we set on the calendar the dates. Well, the next day, we got in the, what do you call it, mail, the overnight mail, tickets, plane tickets. Then, when we arrived at the airport, there was someone standing at the gate and said, oh, welcome, Robertses, and they handed us a contract for a car paid for in full. When we stepped into the hotel, the clerk said, oh, we're glad to see you, Mr. and Mrs. Roberts, and they handed us an envelope with $500 cash. So we put our bags down, went down, sat on the shore, and the waves rolling in and out, in and out, in and out. And in a few minutes I said to Maggie, well, I'm refreshed, let's get to work. Something wonderful about the gentle, rolling waves. But another time when this dear man had gotten us to agree to come, there had been one of these incredible storms. The waves were up over the power lines on Ocean Boulevard. The first 3 floors of his hotel were washed out. How would you like to take a vacation sitting on the shore with waves 36 feet over your head? These men, says Jude, are wild, raging waves of the sea, dashing out their own shame. Everywhere we look in America, we see these wild, raging waves of the sea in the churches. No wonder they're being vacated rapidly. No wonder so few lost people are willing to pay any attention to our claims of Christianity. Have you ever entered into an explicit agreement with God through the power of Jesus Christ to be a gentle, rolling wave, so that anybody in all your world could sit down beside you and know profoundly the peace of God. And number 5, stars. Not wandering stars that Jude describes, for whom the black darkness has been reserved forever, but fixed stars. Now, not fixed stars in the sense of important or popular or well-known, but fixed stars in the sense that we are where God put us. I like to hope that anybody in all my world can find out where Mr. Roberts is at and know where they need to be. That they can take a bearing from my life. Fixed stars are a source of wonderful good. Wandering stars of untold damage. By God's grace, years ago, I entered into explicit agreement with God to be a charted reef, a moisture-laden cloud, a fruit-bearing tree, a gentle, rolling wave, and a fixed star. I'm not making a boast. I'm not saying that it has happened fully as it ought. But I am saying that agreement is in place. I'm not looking for praise. I'm not trying to make followers. All I want is to be the man that God called me to be and made possible by the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I'm urging you, before you leave this place, to enter into explicit agreement with God, to be a charted reef, a moisture-laden cloud, a tree full of fruit, a gentle, raging, a gentle, rolling wave, and a fixed star.